Okay, viewers, this is the platform of MINDGROOMERS and your own favorite reality talk show with Aurangzeb Soharwardi. The topic which we are discussing today is need of the hour and talk of the town globally, and that is digital era, its dynamics, its challenges. So we have one of the experts of digital anthropology with us, Payal Arora from Holland, Amsterdam. She has such an illustrious career and such amazing achievements that one complete program is required to explain that what she has done and what she is doing. So, without getting into that, I would first of all pay a lot of tributes, lot of heartiest acknowledgements and thanks to Payal for sparing time and joining us in this wonderful show. Thank you very much, Payal.
Thank you so much, Aurangzeb. I mean, it's wonderful to be here and have a conversation. I'm really looking forward to it.
So, in the beginning, I would just request you to please clarify that everywhere in each country, in each region, people are talking about digital era, digital technologies. But kindly tell us, do we really mean what digital era is, and have we tried to groom our minds according to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hype about technology because, and for good reason, because, if you look at the history of technology, it has always given a lot of hope as well as a lot of fear because it's an aspect of novelty, and novelty intervening into our lives means disruption, right? And we all people intrinsically are afraid of change. However, people who are in very oppressed conditions in very different ways, socioeconomics, want that change desperately. They don't want to wait for their children or grandchildren to experience it. They want it now, right? And so they're willing to take that risk and they're willing to embrace technology. So I'm living in the Netherlands, and I've actually lived in the US for 10 years. I've also been in Europe for 10 years. So I've spent much of my time in the West, and I'm from India. So I've seen the diversity of mindsets basically is here because people have a very established safety net. They are they change incrementally. They are more critical of digital technologies, whereas I notice in many parts, whether it's Nigeria or it's in Pakistan, India, doesn't matter. There's a lot of enthusiasm saying, you know what, we can leapfrog our issues because we have a lot of issues, but we're not willing to keep lagging behind. We want to move forward. We want to accelerate. We want to be there already, right? So, but the question is, what does it actually even mean, digital technologies? And firstly, the conversation, we can't really have it as an abstract way. We have to think about it in terms of what specifically does it mean for my industry, my company particularly, because there's a lot out there. It's like, there's no point thinking in abstraction. If I'm a construction company, I will have specific kinds of technology, maybe the mobile payments, maybe a sort of an interface for internal communications. There's specific technologies which matter for me. If I am a marketing company, different kinds of technology. So I think firstly, we don't talk about it in the abstract. We talk about it in terms of what it means specifically for us in our industry. What is the goal? And that's the thing. It's like, okay, even if you are in a particular company, what do I want to get out of it? Do I want to improve my communication internally with my employees? Do I want to create a public, like a PR campaign? Do I want to bring a idea out into the public and get them excited about it? Whether it's like to rethink what like a computer or a mobile phone can do for you, right? So it's not a utility driven purpose. So there's all these issues, but it starts with something as humble as understanding who you are, what your company is, and what do you want to do.
Okay, wonderful explanation, Payal. Now I would like to ask you that you are a wonderful expert of digital anthropology. So kindly explain what sort of field it is and what are its dynamics and what the future of digital anthropology is.
Yes, of course. I mean, in fact, this is a question I keep getting a lot on LinkedIn, actually. And I like so many messages. I must have got hundreds of messages. I'm thinking I should have a show on just that. And, especially during COVID, that becomes really important because what this means is, see, the conventional field of anthropology is a study of human behavior and understanding not from a superficial perspective but going deep, like what they call going native, right? Which is I'm with the people not just to understand what is happening but why is it happening. If you don't
Okay.
understand the why, then it doesn't really matter about the what, because you may just reproduce the same old. You have to understand what motivates people to do what they do, and what motivates people is usually based on their socioeconomic conditions. What is it like? Maybe I'm part of a rural community and they have, it's not acceptable to do this or that, right? So these behaviors are influenced by your surrounding. We're not individual units that are floating around with free will. We are shaped by our family, our friends, our society, the laws in place, right? So what digital anthropology does is says that, look, yes, it is about the study of social life, but it's about social life online, and it's not a replication of the life, physical life we live in, because the digital space, right? Facebook, for example, has become a fundamental public space. And it is not that we are behaving exactly the same way, because in fact, like I'll give you something concrete, is I was contacted on Twitter by a tech company sending me responses that they've come up with a new innovation based on my book, and I was completely intrigued by it because it's a dating site for low-income populations in conservative cultures, right? And they understand that it's not acceptable for women to just show off their looks and go in bikinis and profile themselves like in different countries in Europe or the US, where you're showing off your body, your face, your makeup. There's a lot of social stigma on that. So the visual, it has a lot of repercussions. So what they have innovated is audio matchmaking. You have an avatar,
Okay.
so it's a brilliant idea, right? I mean, because
Yeah.
it keeps you safe, but it also allows you to explore it because, a majority of these next billion users are teenagers who imagine they're obviously curious about what does it mean to be in love. You're fed with Bollywood movies into your brain, and you're like,
Yeah.
I want to be that person. I want to fall in love. So it's a safe, and on the other hand, less than 2% of people have arranged romance marriages, right? Majority in the global south, Pakistan, India, South Asia, even Africa, have arranged marriages. So this is their way. It's not a replication of their reality. It's a teasing away of, I want to feel I have experience. So when I get married, I can say I had a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And the audio matchmaking is a way in which you can just explore your teenhood. And it's a interesting, it's completely thinking out of the box without thinking, pegging your business to the Western constructs. Because
Yes.
it's so digital anthropology is about saying that behavior is uniquely online, right? Because obviously in reality, we see each other. And we're not just going to go and talk to a stranger on the street, are we? Just because somebody says, hey, there's a guy who is interested in you. There's a lot of people watching you, etc. But online, there's less of a, you can just go in private messaging, right? And you can just start messaging. So digital anthropology is exploring how do we change who are these avatars, because we have a bandwidth which is broader than our actual physical life. We are constantly trying to express ourselves as people, and we want to have multiple options of doing so. And sometimes our physical realities can be very restrictive. So you see a lot, I'm sure those who have nephews, nieces will see them always glued on their mobile phone because they're like, you have no idea what they're doing. But really, whether it's in the gaming communities, my nephew has constantly got friends in Ireland to constantly chatting. I feel like his life is there and not here, you know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of you relate to that. And we have to understand that, especially during COVID times. It keeps your sanity, right?
Okay, that's such a wonderful explanation about digital anthropology and its impact our sociology and our mindset, I would like to ask you that most of the critics say that this has negatively impacted our society as people are getting more isolated by the excessive use of this technology and their mindset is totally negatively changing. What you have to say about this?
See, it's like with every tool and every space, there's the whole spectrum of possibilities, right? If I go into, on the streets, for example, can I blame the street necessarily on, well, the street, there can be violence as well as I can actually go and connect with nice, like we have like a nice music festival and I can enjoy it too, right? So it's another digital space, doesn't mean that there's no responsibility. Of course, we see the growing hate speech. We see there's a lot of negativity growing because these technologies have the amplification ability, which in the previous times, it wasn't that. We have 2 points, right? One is the speed at which a sort of a news travels and the scale at which it travels, right? So the impact can be magnified on both ends. And yes, in just like public space, and there is a sort of a not only legal regulation on what you can do in that, but also socio-economic and more soft skills about what is acceptable and decent thing to do, right? And I think that is something that as a public online, we have to call on each other when people start to fake, not in a negative, you don't serve negative for negative. So when somebody starts to do something negative, call on them. Or like, if someone on WhatsApp is spreading fake news, oftentimes they themselves don't know it. They think it's true. And my own family WhatsApp group, my family is constantly spreading fake news. I don't think they're reading it properly. And rather than saying they're stupid, it's trying to reach out and educate and say, hey, the source is problematic. Where do you think they're getting it? It doesn't seem true. Because, in the end of the day, most people, are just a bit scared that, they are getting into these new territories. And we have to come together to make sure that space is a healthier space for as many people to enjoy, right? And this specifically pertains to women because women are at a much more vulnerable end, and children, by the way, children who are, we don't have enough safety net because there's a problem because parents are not as sophisticated with digital technologies as children. So we can't, it's a wrong thing. It's sort of a neoliberal idea that let parents regulate. That's not fair. We need to have sort of first technology companies need to take responsibility about the kinds of, say, advertising to children. They have the ability to have a rule across different parts of the world that you cannot advertise to children, period. And advertising has taken on a whole spectrum of possibility. Now it comes in the form of edutainment, gaming. It starts to plug in soft ways, and it's very manipulative. We need to be able to protect the children in that way, right? And women in terms of it's, if you want women to participate online, and there's a disturbing trend in the last year or so where we see a decline in participation because they're completely afraid. Even their fathers, their brothers are afraid for them, their husbands, because what seems like an innocent thing can be taken completely out of context. And when women say you have to remove this content, technology companies have to respond to it within 24 hours. But they are not, we need to put that pressure. And, things have changed because in the, now whether it's Pakistan or basically the global South countries, we have power in numbers and in youth, right? And that itself, and that is data. So we actually have an asset to leverage. It's not that, oh, these technology companies are so powerful that we can't do anything. Of course we have, if there's enough momentum, right? So I mean, look at the geopolitics playing out. When you ban an app, what you're doing is you're denying consumers of a digital space, you're denying data. And that is basically currency. So let's leverage on it to hold technology companies also responsible, right?
So, Payal, this is really amazing to listen to your analysis. And on the basis of this, I would like to take you further ahead and by asking you that now connectivity is producing a very vast community, global. People are connected in different countries, in different regions. How, in your analysis or in your research, this has impacted our mindsets, being global through technology?
I think there's a sense of solidarity, and I mean, it goes again in a positive and a negative way, right? So just look at the recent Black Lives Matter. Like it's sort of it seems like the whole world suddenly starts to empathize with it, right? And there's like global protests. And in what is the interesting puzzle is that places like Korea, who probably many Koreans have never met a black person in their life before, right? I don't even know how many Pakistanis have met a black person in their life, right? But suddenly, where's all this empathy coming from? Because it's become symbolic of, because these digital technologies sort of signal that we are not uniquely, say, of our own kind. We have a bigger humanity that sort of relates to us, because the Black Lives Matter is a signal of injustice, police brutality, and we know the police cops across the world tend to do a lot, and get away with it, right? And so there's this anger of like a helplessness, and this idea that can we hold accountable those who are supposed to protect us and inadvertently do the reverse, and that is not right. So I think it's really tapping into that. It's not about the African Americans per se. It's about feeling the helplessness and saying enough is enough. We don't want to feel helpless. So I think there is that as a very appealing feeling that you're not alone. For example, I know the Dalit community in India has been very frustrated that the media has not given them their due course, a platform. But what's interesting is by digital media, they're able to leverage on hashtags and different kinds of online communities that go beyond the Indian. So they leapfrog the Indian audience because they're like, okay, fine. The Indian media is not going to give us a platform, but we're going to go to a global community who will resonate with us. Or the Palestinians are riding on also the Black Lives Matter, trying to profile their plight over that of, because they're not going to get the kind of fair coverage from Israel media, right? And the Palestinian media won't actually get that kind of outreach because it's too local. So this is a strategy that allows people to leapfrog and reach a global audience, which creates online pressure, because nobody is actually looking at, oh, hang on, are these profiles originally from where? Nobody's thinking. They just see a momentum being built, and then it's a flagging of saying, okay. And what's interesting is it flows back into mainstream media because it's a sort of a flagging to mainstream saying, hey, this is something which needs to be talked about. So it's an interesting phenomena happening. But of course, mind you, this is also a very powerful way in which terrorist networks can become much more consolidated. And then you have blockchain, which actually allows them, like, this is a great dark net, the deep net and the dark net, where they're able to share secrets of how effectively can we circumvent legal restrictions. So they are pioneering all kinds of businesses, gray to black markets, by sharing ideas. So it goes both ways. I'm currently working on a project on the wet markets and the banning of the wet markets in China. And, my colleague Natasha, she's from Zimbabwe, and we're looking at anti-poaching technologies. And you notice that they are going online. So the wet markets are banned, but there's now a thriving e-commerce network for selling these kind of products, these wildlife products. And it's very open on WhatsApp. It's not even going into the deep dark net. Now it's happening completely across board because they know by the sheer number that they can get away with it, because UN or any of these regulatory capacities, conservation organizations don't have the capacity to police them. So so it happens in multiple ways. Let's just say community can go in multiple directions.
Okay. Communities can go in multiple directions. So if we talk about the researchers and academicians like you, They are very much familiar with the digital world and digital anthropology, and they are researching also. They are exploring this world. But let's talk about common people. There is a huge influx of this technology in all parts of the world. What, in your opinion, people have done? Have they really groomed their minds to use these technologies positively, or they are just struggling socially and emotionally and psychologically?
So it's interesting that I was in my own field work when I was writing my book. There was a lot of enthusiasm for self-actualization, but it comes at a learning pace, right? Because a lot of them are new to these technologies. So one is like it's simple. Like I said, a lot of them are teenagers, so they're discovering like some simple tips by these young boys, in these area like low income or rural town areas. They're told that, hey, Indian girls won't friend you, but Brazilian girls are much easier to friend. So they friend Brazilian girls, and then they have, we were wondering, how do they then have a communication? They don't know Portuguese. These guys don't know Hindi, or Telugu, whichever. And then they're like, well, Google Translate, obviously. And what's interesting is that they learned all that, right? They found they share this kind of information. So I find that really interesting when you're motivated. And this is what goes back to motivation: is mind grooming takes place starts with, am I motivated to mind groom in the first place? And what motivates me depends on my age, depends on what is the most crucial. If you remember yourself as a teenager, we are constantly also worried about, am I normal? This is a thing in your head. Is my body normal? You feel constantly unsure of yourself. You're very insecure. So there's also an organization that is telling me that, and I was looking at their data, is that a lot of these sites, they have, this anonymous Ask Me Anything sites, and many of them from low-income countries is about asking simple things like, there's something wrong with my breast, something wrong with the body issues, which is completely taboo. You can't talk to parents, you can't talk to your friends about things happening with your body. People don't talk about menstruation, for girls. So you have no idea. You think you're some freak of nature, and then you go online and it says, hey, it's normal. It's okay. This is typical at that stage, right? So I think it is really interesting is that the learning curve. There's another population, by the way, which is also deeply neglected, is older people. So older people think they are completely checked out, right? But that's not true. Last year, a KPMG report said that there was a 16% spike in older people's usage. And here's the interesting thing about senior citizens. They use fewer apps, but for many, many hours, like triple the amount. And they're very loyal, right? And makes sense. But the thing is that they're tired of feeling dependent on their family, and it's not like their grandchildren will teach them. Sometimes they feel it's very condescending. I know from my own experience with my mother, she gets very irritated when I try to explain to her, because sometimes she thinks I'm being condescending, and because they're very proud. Of course, when we get older, we'll also be proud. We're like, who do you think you are, putting yourself on a pedestal? Just wait when your turn come, right?
Yeah.
And they want to, so they share with each other. Like my own mother has a WhatsApp group with all her school friends, and they share tips, right? And so this kind of informal learning is something we have to see as an invaluable property. What we are doing right now is also informal learning. We are, as a community, mind grooming ourselves. And I'm also learning from the kind of questions you're asking, is what is important to people right now to talk about, right?
That's really great, Payal. Now, another question arises that most of us are living like a common person in our societies, countries, regions, in a very depressing environment, which is very negative, which is very limited. This digital era requires innovative mindset, fresh mindset, proactive mindset. In your opinion, how to develop that innovative mindset in such a confined and depressing environment?
And Well, that's true. I mean, it is a if you just look at the news, you keep thinking the world is coming to an end every day. So if it's not going to be COVID, it's going to be the climate crisis. That's not it. There's
Yes.
going to be some sort of political, geopolitical war, So I mean, the truth is that's the role of the media. They like the good story, and they tend to. There's always been a bias towards covering the. It's much more appealing to cover the end of the world kind of stories than a more incremental boringness of being normal, right, and having a normal time. So I mean, the reality is, yes, don't take like step back a little bit from the media, give yourself a little bit of a dose, and not engage too deeply and go spiraling down it. But what's more important is pay attention to what's around you, right? What matters around you. And I think what this has done is that it's reminded us is that if you look at how innovation is framed in the first place, it's usually very dramatic and big. Like it's all about the grand, right? Innovation, it's a next Apple, the next, something big. But actually, a lot of innovation, which is of value to you and I, is something which is humbler, smaller. It's a tweak, it's a nudge in our everyday life. Like, for example, changing the way in which you sit, right, can actually deliver a better breathing mechanism. Just an example. If I have a posture and I sit without hunching, I'm breathing from my stomach. Just basic yogic principle. And it's a just incremental change can deliver so much more energy. And that's just a metaphor for the way we use the online space. Is that, am I engaging in ways in which I'm being educated? Am I learning something new? Am I building the right kind of community where I am exploring the right kind of questions, which is possible, not questions which are completely pointless, like, is COVID going to end the way we know it? These sort of like, I hate these questions because, like, what are you trying to say? Like, yes and no questions go nowhere. I mean, it's the way it is happening to us. We will pass it. We will live through it. What we need to see is, how are we dealing together as a family, as an individual? You need to be strong mentally and not go into a depressive mode. What makes you happy? And it is very personal. So you need to do some kind of reflection, because if you're not happy, your family will be unhappy, your community will be unhappy, your employees or your colleagues will be unhappy. So it comes at a broader level. So start with yourself. What does it take? And it is different things. Maybe for me, it takes, taking a walk every evening. Maybe somebody else, it's reading a good book. Third is maybe just keeping quiet for 15 minutes in the morning. Just with your chai, simple. It could be as small as that. And see, that is connected to how we behave online. Because if I am calmed down, I won't get so angry on Twitter or on all these things. And I'm like, oh, how dare they say this on Facebook? And I'm going to get angry as hell. And I'm going to also make comments, and I'm going to share this. And, all this takes out of us, and that's really how we should approach this. And what I really like is that every time we have this sort of crisis, the beauty of the human mind is we think, in alternative ways, and we think through it as a group of people, and we have survived for so long, and we will of course survive and thrive. It's not just about surviving, but thriving, because sometimes you need that push, and you see it in very tangible ways. Bangladesh, within 1 month, was able to scale a mobile, payment app in 1 month, right? Because it is astounding it shows that when the government wants to commit to doing something, they can. It can take 10 years for them, or it can take 1 month. And that, I think, people have noticed. If a government decides, they will do it. And same thing with people. If people shift their way of thinking, things can happen. It's just as simple as that. And sometimes you need this. So I'm of a big believer that everything happens for a reason. We are going through this. That means it's a way, an opportunity for us to reflect on what is happening for us and what do we want, which is better for us and our family and our future generations.
After listening to so much powerful, positive words from you, I am really enthralled, and I just wish that all the viewers, all the listeners who are listening to you, who are watching you, they must be getting lot of positive vibes. Now, since we
I
are
hope so.
approaching to the end of the program, I would like to ask you your vision about this digital anthropology, your work. If you want to share with us a few of your works which you are doing, it will be very beneficial for our viewers.
Yeah, so right now I'm running a lab with a colleague of mine, Usha Raman. It's called Fem Lab, and Aurangzeb can share the link. But it's basically about seeing what is the future of work look like for for developing countries, which is completely reconstituting the and formalizing work, right? Because we are talking about 70 to 80% of our everyday work is informal labor, which is very unique, right? Because majority of the Western world is the reverse. So that allows us to brainstorm across board of how these platforms, these gig platforms, which appear temporary, but actually is really about professionalizing services, and how are the everyday people able to capitalize on it in ways which are enabling them and others, and how can the government and the legal structures, we're working. What is really fun is the team is completely interdisciplinary. We have engineers, we have legal scholars, sociologists, anthropologists, media people, and I invite people who would like to partake in it to, because we have openings for external interns who would like to be part of the team, because we have people from very different parts of the world, and that way you can network and maybe broaden your horizons, and who knows, through these networks more actual opportunities. So yeah, I think that would be a good ending note for this. And of course, Aurangzeb, thank you for inviting me on this show and for the very thoughtful questions.
Oh my God, I just want to offer you as an intern for your project. I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed. So,
Thank
dear
you.
viewers, this was Payal Arora. Indeed, I can say that this was one of our best programs, intellectually also, and discussion-wise also. And you must have got a real crux and benefit from the talk of an expert who really spoke from her heart. So I'm really thankful, Payal, and inshallah, I will try that we invite you in another program also. And I am really hopeful that you will give us time as you gave now. And on this thanking note, we conclude our program by extending best wishes to you also, your country also, your work also. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, and take care. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.